we are now in the Old Testament. So we spent all last year taking our time in 1 Peter, 2 Peter, and Jude. So this year we thought that it would be a good idea to at least start the year out in the Old Testament. So as we transition into the Old Testament and teaching about something that we're not necessarily used to, I wanted to make sure I took the time to give an introduction. So usually I try to do two things at once, and I like to give an introduction and then preach through a passage, but sometimes I can be a bit longer than I want to be. So Andrew said maybe I should just break them up. So this week we're going to do the introduction. I'm going to give you guys a background. I'm going to give you a little bit of information about what is going on. So right now it's going to be a little bit more teaching heavy. So lock in with me. It's not going to be too long, hopefully. That's the goal. The goal is not to be too long, but I do want to get a good general understanding of what this book is about as we step into studying it more deeply. Does that sound good? Does that sound good? All right, cool. So, I want to start. Have you guys ever looked at the world and maybe your own life, maybe you even thought, God, why are things happening the way that they're happening? Either, God, are you doing anything right now? Maybe not in a rebellious way. Maybe just asking an honest question. Why is the world the way that it is? Maybe you see injustice, you see suffering, you see violence, you see people who are doing wrong seeming to get away with it. And maybe you're left wondering what a godly response is supposed to be. I think the book of Habakkuk exists because God knows that that question lives in the heart of faithful people. Habakkuk isn't written to explain the very reason for evil, but it's to show us how a godly person lives and speaks when evil is present and God feels silent. So, we're going to be stepping into a different type of literature. So maybe you guys have learned this kind of stuff in English class or literature class. The book of Habakkuk, it belongs to a genre that is called prophetic literature. And within that, specifically, it's a minor prophet in the Old Testament. And so it's basically broken up into two ways. There's the major prophets. They're only called major because they're really, really long, like 50 chapters. And then you have the minor prophets, and there's about 12 of them, and they're called minor because they're shorter. So not that their message is any less significant, it's just shorter. That make sense so far? So even more specifically, Habakkuk is different from most of the other prophetic literature because it's not usually how prophetic writing works is the prophet goes and he speaks to the people and he says, y'all suck, y'all need to be better, nya. But Habakkuk's different. Instead, he turns and almost is defending the people in a sense and turns to God and be like, God, why are you letting this happen? Why are you doing this? So it's a dialogue between him and God for the first 2 chapters, and then a praise at the end. So if we're going to understand it in its scope, it's prophetic literature. So it was written by a prophet. It contains divine revelation, judgment, and assurance from God, and it places that firmly in the prophetic genre. Then to go even deeper than that, it is also a dialogue / complaint. It's a lament. So unlike the other ones, like I was saying, Habakkuk is talking to God instead of God telling Habakkuk to tell the people. And then next, there's these woes. So he's basically calling judgment down on these people who are going to bring God's judgment on Israel. And that's kind of common. to most prophetic writing. And then the last chapter of Habakkuk, which is chapter 3, it's a prayer. It's explicitly called a prayer, and it's written very poetically. It's written like a psalm. And even to the point where it has like musical designations. If you didn't know, psalms are mostly songs. So this last chapter is written like a song. So basically, to sum that all up, Habakkuk is a prophetic literature that expressed through lament, dialogue, oracle, and through psalms. So making it one of the most theologically and literally unique book in all of the minor prophets. So which takes us to our first point. Who is this prophet? Who is the author? So Habakkuk, we know two things for sure about him. First, that he's a prophet. And second, that his name is Habakkuk. That's officially, concretely, all we actually know about him. He's a prophet and his name is Habakkuk. Yeah, that's a ton of information, right? So that's all we know for sure. So I want to try to take the time for us to kind of sift through that and understand what that means. So that concrete information we see in Habakkuk 1:1, where it says, the oracle that Habakkuk the prophet saw. Or Habakkuk 3:1. I know, right? Super, super fascinating stuff. A prayer of Habakkuk the prophet, according to the Shigionoth. Yeah, bless me, right? Sounded like I sneezed. So, to give you a little bit more, a prophet, maybe you don't know what a prophet means. I'll give you a rough definition of what a prophet is. A prophet is someone who speaks on behalf of and interprets the will of a supernatural being, often rebuking or predicting events. A prophet is someone who speaks on behalf of and interprets the will of a supernatural being, often rebuking or predicting events. And in our instance, and in all of the Bible, Habakkuk and all the other prophets are speaking on behalf of Yahweh. So based on the prayer in chapter 3 and the different musical designations you see in verses 1, 3, 9, 13, and 19, many scholars believe that Habakkuk may have been some type of Levitical priest of some sort, or at least associated with temple worship. Because not many people outside of people who worked specifically in the temple would have those specific types of writings or kind of structure in their music. And another fun little tidbit, the only other place a Habakkuk is brought up in all of anything remotely close to biblical writings is from something called the Apocrypha, which we do not have in our Bibles. And it's from this place called Bel and the Dragon. B-E-L. It should pop up really soon. There you go. B-E-L and the Dragon in verse 33. And it says, now there in Jewry, just to give you a quick little why in the world it says that. It is written in an older English, and I couldn't find a version that had a little bit more modern language. At least I couldn't find it. So it says, now there was in Jewry a prophet called Habakkuk, and it's spelled a little different, at least in English, who had made pottage and had broken bread in a bowl, and was going into the field for it to bring it to the reapers. I could have told you this whole story. Basically, to go on from there, this dude gets a word from the Lord to go and bring food to Daniel, like the prophet Daniel, who was in the lion's den, and said, go over here to Babylon and bring it. And he's like, I don't know where that's at. And God said, you'll know. And then he went over there and gave it to him. That's basically the story. This is what we call an apocryphal. We don't know who wrote it. It is a additional ending to the book of Daniel. Anyways, so we have no confirmation that this is the same person, but what is interesting is that this story could also line up with the life of Habakkuk, since he was around during the deportation of Judah to Babylon. Next, the book portrays Habakkuk as a man of deep moral sensitivity, whose heart breaks at the injustice that characterizes the society of his day. Habakkuk cares a lot about obeying Yahweh. And he sees the world around him as being contrary to what people should be doing. And he's asking Yahweh, where is he at? So next, when did this happen? Dating. We also don't fully know. Did you not get it all in? Do you need the rest of the fill-ins? Was that long here? There you go. Yeah, you said it a little too loud. I heard you. Anyways, go to the next point. When did this happen? So we don't exactly know when specifically, but we can kind of dig in and kind of figure out exactly where. So we have some context clues. Maybe you guys know a little bit about that when it comes to reading. Context clues like Habakkuk chapter 1, verse 6. It says, "For behold, I am raising up the Chaldeans, that bitter and hasty nation, who march through the breadth of the earth, to seize dwellings not their own." So our first place to kind of think about is the Chaldeans. So to start thinking about, when did this happen? When God rose up the Chaldeans. And the Chaldeans were originally a loosely united group of tribes that lived in a large portion of the Assyrian Empire. That is a picture. Do you need it? Can you go back real quick? We got slow writers. It's hard to smell. You're right. You're right. Words are hard to smell. But the Chaldeans, which actually really interesting, Abraham came from Ur of the Chaldeans. So weird little connections. Anyways, can we put up that map? So this is the map of the known, at least, empires during the time. So you see that place right there on the right that says Elam and Susa? That whole region and that whole little loop around is kind of like the Assyrian Empire, and the Chaldeans were in that like large section, and these groups came together, these different tribes came together and conquered Assyria. And they basically started the Babylonian Empire. So it came from there. So they were always causing trouble to their Assyrian lords, and eventually they successfully rebelled, and they placed this dude whose name was Nebuchadnezzar. What a great name. I was seeing the different names of these dudes. Nebuchadnezzar was the first person instilled into the Babylonian Empire. He was the first king, and he ruled from 625 to 605 BC. You guys probably hear... Yeah, I got you. You ready? Nabopollassar. Nebuchadnezzar. Yeah, there you go. What? It's a name. Maybe you should name your next kid that, dude. Come on. Nebuchadnezzar Tally. Adonai. There you go. So the Chaldeans then ruled all of Babylonia and established their empire and started a period of great expansion. And because the Chaldeans came to power around 625, can we put the slide back up so they have something to look at? That looks cool. Many scholars think that the prophecy of Habakkuk was written shortly before that time that they kind of really rose into prominence. So the book doesn't necessarily indicate that, but it doesn't indicate that the Chaldeans are the Babylonians, but it also doesn't really say that they're going to be the ones coming into like this huge power. They don't really give us the timing of it. So Habakkuk describes these people, though, as a bitter and hasty nation that sees dwellings that are not their own, and even that their horsemen come from afar. So Babylon's reputation of military might kind of suggests a time after the Battle of Carchemish that happened in 605. So that's when, maybe you guys know this Bible name, Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar II, he defeated the Egyptians and established the Babylonians as an important world power. Or, that could be one option. Or another one, it's possible that their reputation was gained from the Babylonian conquest of Nineveh when they went and destroyed this huge capital city in 612 BC. So there's a lot of ambiguity on when we can actually say the date. But to give in additional context that helps us understand it, we could see it through what was happening in Judah, which is your next fill-in, what was happening in Judah. So to the date of this book, we have to also think about what was going on in Judah, which is the southern kingdom of Israel. Because that's who the prophecy is about. This is not about my son. This is about a tribe. It's a typo, but it's Judah. Judah. Yes. So the social conditions of Habakkuk and in his day seemed to fit best with a time frame around the death of the Judean king Josiah in 609 BC. I hope you guys are as interested and fascinated by this stuff as I am, because I nerd out on all this background stuff. So I hope you guys are absolutely locked in with me. Yes. So Josiah's reign was characterized by tremendous religious reform. And that all started when they found the book of the law. And it was found during the renovations of the temple. We see that in 2 Kings 22. Let's read it together. It should be on the screens. Starting in verse 8, it says, "And Hilkiah, the high priest, said to Shaphan, the secretary, I have found the book of the law in the house of the Lord." Talking about the book of the law, we're talking about the Bible. We're talking about the first 5 books, the Torah. "I have found the book of the law in the house of the Lord." And Hilkiah gave the book to Shaphan, and he read it. And Shaphan, the secretary, came to the king and reported to the king, "Your servants have emptied out the money that was found in the house and have delivered it to the hand of the workmen who have the oversight of the house of the Lord." They're rebuilding the temple. They're making it look nice again after it's been messed up a few times. Then Shaphan, the secretary, told the king, "Hilkiah the priest has given me a book." And Shaphan read it before the king. When the king heard the words of the book of the law, he tore his clothes. And the king commanded Hilkiah the priest and Ahikam the son of Shaphan and Achbor the son of Micaiah and Shaphan the secretary and Isaiah the king's servant, saying, "Go inquire of the Lord for me and for the people and for all Judah concerning the words of this book that has been found. For great is the wrath of the Lord that is kindling against us, because our fathers have not obeyed the words of this book to do according to all that is written concerning us." So the book wasn't necessarily happening during this time, because this was a time of great social reform in Judah. And Habakkuk was describing his society as being filled with destruction and violence. See that in verse 3. And there was also an unfair judicial system that led to oppression of the righteous. That's verse 4. So it seems that the best date for Habakkuk's ministry was between 608 and 605 BC, early in the reign of the next king, Jehoiakim, who ruled from 609 to 598 BC. Next, let's go to the background. What was going on when this was written? So if we have the basic idea of when the kind of general time frame, let's explore what was going on when it was being written. So we touched a bit about the reign of King Josiah and how he introduced incredible reforms back to following Yahweh. But the period starting after his death were some of the most bitter and difficult times in the history of the kingdom of Judah. In 612 BC, the Babylonians destroyed the Assyrian city of Nineveh, and in 2 years, they eliminated the last traces of the former Assyrian rule in Mesopotamia. And then the Egyptians, who had been allies of the Assyrians, sought to solidify their hold in this region that was once held by the Assyrians. So they marched and had this crazy battle at Carchemish, which was an important city on the Euphrates River. And that's where King Josiah tried to stop them. He eventually died in that battle. It was just a really crazy turning point. The Egyptians then placed Jehoiakim on the throne instead of the rightful successor of Josiah, Jehoahaz. Hopefully you're having a lot of fun with all these names. Jehoiakim was on the throne when Jehoahaz should have been. Jehoahaz. Do you need me to spell it for you? Okay. Jehoahah. Okay, you ready? Okay. Jehoahaz. Jehoahaz. Yep. The rightful successor of Josiah. So Jehoiakim, he was an Egyptian vassal, which means he paid a ton of money. He had to pay heavy tributes to continue to be free and be relatively independent, or at least not be destroyed by Egypt. And at this time, the faith of the people, rightly so, I'd think, or maybe understandably, began to waver. And the religious reforms under Josiah had resulted not in national blessing as they thought that it would happen, but in the loss of their freedom the way that they knew it. So the general vibe of Judah switched from relative stability to oppression and violence. So in 604 BC, the Babylonians advanced into this region, the Syro-Palestinian area where Judah is, not facing too much fight from all those people, kind of walked through pretty effortlessly because everyone else was pretty weak. So you can really see Judah at this time as this buffer zone between Egypt and Babylon. So at that time, Jehoiakim kept flip-flopping between transferring his allegiances between Nebuchadnezzar and to Egypt. He would go back and forth. So when that pretty important battle happened and Pharaoh Necho's army challenged Babylon and both sides suffered a ton of losses, it made the Babylonians retreat. And then Jehoiakim went back to Egypt. But then once the Babylonians advanced again, he switched back over. But that also led to the fall of Jerusalem in 586 BC. So maybe you weren't as excited about all that fun stuff. So I'll give us now the message of Habakkuk. So with that background, at least it gives us a frame of mind of what we're stepping into. At least to try to get into the shoes of the readers, maybe even the person writing it, to see what was going on. So I want to give us a bit of an idea, maybe even the main message. Start with the main message. The main message of the book of Habakkuk is to explain what a godly person's attitude should be towards the presence of evil in the world. The main message of the book of Habakkuk is to explain what a godly person's attitude should be towards the presence of evil in the world. It also addresses the nature of God's justice in punishing moral evil. So, I'll give you guys a second. Was it too small? Dang, sorry. Just a little bit? Sorry, I'll be better next time. Okay. So, Habakkuk is broken up into 3 major sections, which is how we're going to teach it. First is the dialogue between Habakkuk and Yahweh. That's for chapter 1, verse 1 through chapter 2, verse 5. You guys probably have it in your notes. It might come up on the screen. So the first dialogue is verses 1 through 11, which has the superscription, which is saying the oracle of Habakkuk. Then you have the first complaint, the violence and injustice, and Yahweh's response. Then you have the second dialogue, where Habakkuk complains again. Does Yahweh approve of injustice? Where Yahweh responds, no, and live in faithfulness. Then you have the 5 woes, where it is the plunder of the plunderers, the deviser to decry, the destruction of the destroyer, shame for glory, the folly of idolatry. And then you have the last part, where I think is super sick, Habakkuk's prayer, where it has the title, it talks about Yahweh coming back. It's the cool part about this, basically what I want to do in showing all these different things is how, first, the pattern is really weird and how it's structured, but he patterns everything through a series of hardcore questions, kind of questioning God and his involvement in history. His questions reflect deep doubts, frustrations, and concerns with God. He says things that many Christians would be scared to say to God. Things like Habakkuk 1:2, where it says, "O Lord, how long shall I cry for help, and you will not hear me? Or I cry to you violence, and you will not save?" Or Habakkuk 1:13, where it says, "You who are pure eyes, who are of purer eyes than to see evil and cannot look at wrong. Why do you idly look at traitors and remain silent when the wicked swallow up the man more righteous than he?" He asks hard questions. Yet he ends the book with a psalm, with a praise, a song that expresses that he understands that God has a purpose and ultimately that he will rest on that and submit to God. So one of the prophet's chief problems, the main thing that he's kind of attacking and questioning God about, is seeing God's inactivity in the world and allowing evil to continue to go unpunished. So God's answer was that he does punish evil in his own time and with his chosen instruments. The world is not an arena in which evil can continue to triumph. And history, I think, testifies of that with the fall of tyrants and of wicked nations. But the thing is can we swallow God's answer? Can we understand why God does things the way that he does things? Does he need to do it the way that we think is right? Or can he do it the way that he wants to, even if we don't understand the way that he does it? So which means that the godly person interprets history in terms of faith, trusting God and affirming that he does righteously rule the world. So the book of Habakkuk ultimately does not explain why God has allowed evil in the world, but it does affirm that the righteous person will see God's activity in history through the eyes of faith. And I think chapter 3 expresses that theme as Habakkuk looks at history and recounts all of God's gracious activity on behalf of his people. So one of the most important theological concepts in this book is that God sovereignly acts in history. God sovereignly acts in history. Habakkuk affirms God's control in all of history and demonstrates that even the godless nations are subject to his control. Their rise and fall is determined not by fortune or luck or whatever, but by God himself. So to close, I hope that was helpful background. I know I need that kind of stuff when I go to start reading something new. So that's why we thought it would be good for you guys to do it. We want to be sure that as we transition from a New Testament letter to Old Testament prophecies, that we can grasp the differences and learn how to apply these ancient words to our lives today. Habakkuk is a small book, but it is packed with such a wealth of knowledge and wisdom that does apply to us today. That does apply to us today. So next week we'll jump into it. We'll start with chapter 1, go into a little bit of chapter 2, and learn about how God works in the world. And we may not understand why he works in certain ways, or does the things that he does, or allows other things to happen that we wouldn't want to happen. But we need to learn that God is a trustworthy and good being. And we can rest assured that whatever he is doing in this world is for a purpose and is going to bring about something great. Even if we can't see or don't even have a way to imagine it. Can you put the last slide up? Some people didn't get it. No worries. Did I put a lot of stuff to fill in? I'm just kidding. I know it was. Can you put the last slide up, Kathy, please? Or I could just read it out to you. Which one? Yeah. One of the most important theological concepts in the book is that God sovereignly acts in history. You have a question there, sir? It's not in your notes? No, not at all. Oh, so you're writing out the whole thing. My bad, dogs. That's on me then. I forgot to add that one then. There you go. Here's a fun little additional fact. There you go. There you go. Or you can just take a picture of it, Randall. Yeah. But anyways, with that being said, maybe you'll continue writing it. Let me pray for you guys so you can go to small groups. Yeah. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you for your word. Thank you for the complexities of life. Thank you that there's so much history and so much knowledge that we can search after, and that you've given us your word for us to try to mine. Lord, I pray that as we are setting the stage for this time in Habakkuk, that we have a deeper sense of who you are, how you act, even if we don't necessarily like the answers that you have. Or maybe we can learn that you are God and we are not. I pray that small groups is a time where you are glorified and we can ask all the big questions, because you are not a small God. You are way bigger than our questions, and you are not afraid of helping us find answers. I pray and I ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen.